I think like learning how to set the boundaries between having higher standards and being a perfectionist, and like how you bring those into a relationship is like so crucial and so important.
Right. How do you differentiate high standards and perfectionism then?
I have high standards.
So let me guess, hold on. You also think that having high standards is preferable to being a perfectionist.
Correct.
And you would say you have high standards while I'm a perfectionist.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Interracial Couple Podcast.
Where it's not all black and white. My name is Sarah. I'm black.
I'm Matthew. I'm white. And today we are going to talk about perfectionism in relationships.
Yep.
Some of the questions around in a healthy relationship, how do you balance perfectionism with high standards? When can perfectionism become controlling, and when can it be something that really leads to improvement in the individuals involved in the relationship?
Yeah, and also looking for us as an interracial couple is like perfectionism can be so many ways be cultural, so how does that affect our relationship,
For sure. That's actually, I think, a big thing, and something I probably would not have noticed had I not spent time living with you in Kenya. Being on time is probably, I wouldn't say is a Kenyan strong suit in general. The country is known for a lot of amazing things. Being on time is not one of them.
Not one of them.
And something that occurred to me when I was living there was like we'd go visit your family, and sometimes there were clocks on the walls and sometimes there weren't. And your mom had a clock on the wall that for a long time never had batteries in it.
Nope, it did not work, and she did not look at it. I actually read this thing is like some people have a casual relationship with time. And I was like, oh my God, that makes a lot of sense. It's like I have a casual relationship with time.
Yep.
Like time just doesn't stress me out. I like being on time. If need be, I will be on time, but it just doesn't stress me out.
But you also going back with that question, which was that one of your best friend, at some point it came up like, what do I need to work on? And she basically said, being on time.
On time. And I looked at that and I was like, you know what? There is something to be said about being on time. And then where there's some times where it's stressful. Like there are things that I think you need to be on time for. And then there are things where I think people just stressed out about time for nothing.
Okay, well, there you go. So those are areas where I think you could see someone who likes to be on time and is very insistent about it. That certainly leads on the perfectionism side. Yeah, and I also think
like sometimes people can be like assholes about it. It's just like, it's like I'm better than because I'm always on time, or like you're bad because you're never on time. I think it's having a relationship where it's like, if you need to be there on time, be there on time. If you don't need to be there on time and you can hang out more, like I don't believe in like going to parties where like, it's like, you come at 2 and leave at 4. Sometimes you leave at 6.
Yeah,
that's okay too, Like I don't like, you go to someone, you're like, we need to be there at 2 and we need to leave at 4. And then you meet people and the conversation is going really well, but you're just like, we gotta go. Like But
that's not a matter of being on time, because leaving at one time is a totally different thing than if you have somewhere to be on time. A party, or even specifically when you leave, is not a timely thing. But if you're meeting someone for coffee, that's a timely thing. If you're showing up to work, that's a timely thing.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, if I need to show up on time for those things, I will show up on time for those things. But I find that sometimes people use time to almost like control others.
Yep. Okay. So
that's
in this relationship, who would fall more on the perfectionism side of the scale?
Definitely not me.
So that came up in a conversation about perfectionism. I don't really consider myself a perfectionist.
Then I don't know who is.
When you look at me, you say Matthew is a perfectionist.
Correct.
Okay.
You think Matthew has high standards.
So how do you differentiate high standards and perfectionism then?
I have high standards.
So let me guess, hold on. You also think that having high standards is preferable to being a perfectionist.
Correct.
And you would say you have high standards while I'm a perfectionist.
Yes.
Okay. Now that we got that cleared up. But I mean, I definitely don't think I'm a perfectionist.
Do you think like you are a perfectionist?
No. And would be sort of my reasoning for that, is that one of the things that perfectionists really struggle with is completing tasks, right?
Okay.
Because how do I complete a task if I need it to be perfect? And particularly in the creative fields, you see people who have a lot of great ideas and don't actually ever bring their work out because they are perfectionists, and you can actually never have something perfect, right? Perfect is not a real thing. And so, I've released 9 feature films. I have directed or produced a bunch of music videos and short films and other, short form documentaries, things like that. And I have high standards, but deadlines come up and you have to deliver. Or you also know that you can hold on to something for so long, and when you try and make something perfect, ultimately you start to kill its energy if you spend too much time trying to make it perfect, because that's simply an impossibility. And so, I have high standards, but perfectionism, I don't think I have it, but we also look in our relationship and say, how do we sort of balance perfectionism with high standards, or just kind of letting things be and letting things be kind of crappy sometimes?
Yeah, I think for me is like, I hear what you're saying, but for me, I think like I move through life. Like I make decisions very quickly, and then either A, correct as I go, or look back and regret.
Yep.
But I don't spend a lot of time before making like major, what people would call like major life choices, And a friend of mine brought that up a couple months ago. Oh my God, like you don't spend a lot of time overthinking things, I'm not sure, like I confuse perfectionist with overthinking because I'm just not an overthinker. If something is good enough, if there's a way it can be done, it's gonna get done. And then it's just done, and either it's good or it's bad, But I think for most of my life, like I just could not afford to overthink. I just had to do, because if I have to overthink about every single decision, like I just feel like I would not do anything.
Well, I think that's also where some of like the cultural changes come in. And we talked about this morning. So we're living in a cabin that we have been doing some renovations on. And one of the things we did was lay new floors in the kitchen and dining room.
Yeah, this girl knows how to lay new floors now. If you're watching this, like I'm just gonna go ahead and just say, like, I have become a really good construction worker.
Yeah, you're a great construction worker. You have a huge career ahead of you in swinging a hammer.
I don't think that's going to happen, but
for what it's worth. But, but putting that on a floor that is, the whole cabin slants a little bit to the south. Some places it slants a little and some a lot. It was over 100-year-old or 100-year-old barn that was renovated. So this will never be perfect.
No, it's rustic. It's a cabin. No matter how much work we put in it, at some point it's still going to be a cabin.
Right. And I think that is when you kind of go back to talking about sort of where you came from and how you have to make quick decisions. You're also working with the materials that you have available to you. You have both your skill set, but then you also have like what's everything around you. If you want to be on time in Kenya, going back to that, like it's hard to be on time in Kenya, particularly if you grew up taking public transportation or walking. That makes being on time really hard because now the tools that you have to work with are not conducive to being on time.
Yeah, I actually want to give one example. It's like one time when we moved to Kenya last year, I made an appointment to be somewhere at, I think it was noon. And so I just was like, I'm going to be there at noon. So I left my house at 6. And the bus that I was supposed to take to where I was going, which was from Nairobi to northern Kenya, they told me they were going to come pick me up at 7:30. So I rushed to like get myself to the bus stop by 7:30. I even took a taxi there. 7:30 comes, I got there like 7:15. And I had lived in America for 10 years. So I had kind of forgotten that actually Kenyans buses are not on time. So I got there 7:15, 7:30 comes, the guy doesn't show, 7:45, 8:30, 9:30, 10, 10:30. He finally showed up like 10:45. And the bus ride was 6 hours. So I was supposed to be there at noon. I didn't show to my meeting until 5.
Right.
You know, and so I showed up to my meeting and I was just like, sorry. And the guy was like, luckily, like he waited. He wasn't like, you know, you said you're going to be here at 12 and you're not. Like I did everything in my power to be there at 12. I didn't have a car. There was like nothing else I could have done. You know, I planned well. I ironed my clothes the night before. Like I did everything right. But it was just like my condition and my circumstances. Like I could not be on time. I'm not making excuses for like not being on time. It just was like,
that becomes impossible. So I think that's what I was talking about is what are the materials they have available while we're working on this cabin, it will never be perfect. So I can't even be a perfectionist. You couldn't look, there's nothing we've done so far and you say, okay, that's going a little too far.
yeah.
And well, I mean, I guess you can. And I think that's one of the things, like even with the floor that we laid, it's a little bit wavy. And I kind of look at it and say, you know what, I could have done it better, but I could never have done it perfectly. And so someone could say, oh, you're a perfectionist for wanting to have done it better. And I'd say, well, perfection was never going to be a part of it. And I think that even, you know, in filmmaking, you know, in my own career, it's impossible to make, I mean, a few people have made virtually perfect films, but that's not something, A, I'm capable of, and B, I've never had the kinds of budgets where I could, you know, where if something really wasn't working, I could go and do reshoots for a week or 2 weeks or a month to get it quote unquote perfect. And so once again, it's really what you have available to you. And I think one of the things for us to kind of look into it is how does perfectionism play into a relationship to benefit a relationship or harm a relationship?
I feel like sometimes where it's like if a partner is washing dishes and someone likes their dishes spotless, you know? And so if a partner washes the dishes and they don't do a perfect job based on like what you think is perfect, then you're just like, no, like wash this spoon again. And then they don't want to do it anymore, you know? Like I've watched a friend who like her dishes washed a certain way. And so when her husband is like, oh, I'm going to give a hand, she's just like, they're not. He doesn't clean them well enough. And I'm just like, to me, as long as they're clean, they don't have to be like cleaned to my standards. Because I'm a pretty clean person, but I'm just like, if I place my standard on my cleanliness, then I'm going to end up as the person who always does the cleaning. It's like, sometimes like
And I think it's hard because also when you're in a relationship, you are moving back and forth kind of between, you know, holding each other's hand, you know, what you do, since we're basically, you know, we're going to be together forever. And what you do impacts me, what I do impacts you.
Correct.
And so perfectionism is obviously pretty difficult. I'm not a fan of perfectionism. I think it's a pretty negative term in a lot of ways. You know, which is why when you say I'm a perfectionist, I want to say, no, I don't want to identify with that. Maybe I am, in which case it's something to work on. But trying to do something perfect, because it's impossible, means you are automatically setting yourself up for failure. And that's going to be true in any relationship, right? Because a relationship, you want to do something as good as you can. But if I washed the dishes and the dishes were kind of gross when I was done, that would be a problem. Right?
Correct. Because
you now need to go eat off and you say, I can't eat off of dirty dishes. You call that clean. I don't. And I could turn around and say, you're just being a perfectionist. And now where do we stand?
So at that point, do I say like I have high standards? I think it's a good line though, because I feel like sometimes when I have like, when I was going to college, like I would be babysitting and I would have the kids wash the dishes. The kids are not going to wash the dishes as good as I would wash them. But even though they're not going to wash the dishes as good as I would wash them, I still let them wash the dishes, because when are they going to learn? And I think in a relationship, there are so many things that, because I'm already so good at it, and if I have like really, really high standards, then
Can I just say, for the record, I can actually wash dishes.
You can wash dishes. That is not like you totally like when it comes to cleaning, like yeah, I have high standards when it comes to cleaning, but you also are like a very clean person.
Yeah.
But let's say like, let's give another example. Like I learned to drive, and I don't know if you can be like a perfectionist in driving, but maybe like, let's talk about high standards. Like I learned to drive in my late 20s. You learn to drive in your teens. So of course you're going to be a better driver because you've had more experiences to do it than I am. So when we moved to Kenya, it's like, yeah, I was scared of driving on the roads, but that didn't mean like you still let me drive so that I can become better at it. And sometimes I find like in relationship, when someone's good at something, they always do it because there's a certain way that they like it being done. And the other partner never gets to do the stuff that the other partner is good at. And so like there is no learning.
Right. And that becomes a bit of a balancing act for a lot of areas. One, which is that there are things that I just do better and things that you do better. And so separating that sometimes is beneficial to our relationship and things that we need to get done. Because if you can do something in half the time, then sometimes we just say, if we want to maximize our time in life, you do the things you're better at, I do the things that I'm better at. So I think there's that. Then there's the other thing too, which is that if perfectionism basically means I'm going to do these things because I don't like the way you do it and vice versa, now you start getting into a thing that can start to border on controlling. And also this question of then how do we actually support each other so that you can get better at the things that I'm better at and I can get better at the things that you are better at. And I think that's so key because when we talk about, controlling or, perfectionism, to what extent do we have sort of the obligation to let each other be free and be as we are, and then also the obligation to be there in order to help lift you to your own highest standards?
Correct. I
want to be better in my life at most things, and if you can provide some of the insight or support for me to get better, then that's a great thing for me. Right? And that becomes this hallmark of a healthy relationship, which is you can let me be less good than you are at some things, while at the same time also helping me to be better.